And if you have original sound on. Huh? It's off. No. Otherwise, this would be truncated. Calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you this Bodhi mind. Calling all you hungry spirits everywhere through endless time. Calling all you hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind, gather round and share this meal. Your joy and sorrow, I make it mine. That's how the Gate of Sweet Nectar starts. It's one of our, do I need to put that on? No. Is it okay? Good? Sometimes it flaps around and makes noise. So again, this is how the Gate of Sweet Nectar begins. And Bernie Glassman, Rōshi, had asked Krishna Das, maybe you're familiar with Krishna Das, to create this introductory verse to the Gate of Sweet Nectar. And Krishna Das is a kirtan singer, which is Hindu devotional music. And he was referred to as the rock star of yoga. This was at the Grammys when he was nominated for a Grammy in 2013. I was blessed in 2019 to be in Yonkers. This was for Bernie Glassman Rōshi's memorial in Yonkers, and Krishna Das was there, and I was on stage with him. I was doing the doan, hitting the bells, and the conch. So that was really lovely. More on that in just a little bit. But first, good evening, all you Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And as I like to be, also include good evening, all you future corpses. Now, I've been having a discussion actually with Nancy Hilliard, and we're both realizing that future is maybe sooner than we think, a little bit closer than we think. As many of us are aging. But as a Buddhist priest and teacher, I really like to encourage folks to get real with their impermanence. Are you? I hope so. Regardless, thank you for the gift of your presence on this beautiful Sunday evening. To those of you here in person and to those of you in Zoom land, good to see you. Especially Clay, I see Clay. I know Clay very well. There's a sign at the front of your Sangha here that reads, I have arrived, I am home. And I always feel that when I come in here. And our little group, San Luis Obispo Zen Circle, is here on Sunday mornings. And White Heron Sangha was my very first Sangha some 30 years ago. I was sitting with the White Heron Sangha before I made my way down to the Zen Center of Los Angeles. But I know many of you very well, Nancy Hilliard has been one of my mentors, actually now for decades. She mentored me when I first started going to the California Men's Colony and doing prison work there. And I'm still there, Nancy. Still trying to do good work. And I wanted to just give appreciation for us being able to use this space on Sunday mornings. I have great gratitude for that. You know, and offering gratitude is kind of a ritual, right? It really is. Expressing gratitude can be transformative. So thank you so much. We are just dipping our big toe into this pond of ritual tonight. There's so much here. I have so much information, it's going to actually lead to a series of classes on it. So we're just, this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. And I was really pleased to see that you folks pause as well to remember the indigenous peoples of this land. We've been doing that as a tradition for many, many years whenever we begin a talk. And you've already done a great job of introducing them. I have a few more things I wanted to throw into the mix. And there was a 1925 book, the Handbook of Indians of California, and they estimated that California's indigenous population decreased roughly from 150,000 in 1848 to 30,000 in 1870, and 16,000 by 1900. Now, this was caused by a mixture of disease, low birth rates, starvation, and our California genocide. Yeah, in 1865, the state of California issued a bounty on Chumash and California tribes, and 100,000 indigenous people were killed. But they are still here, as you said. There's a mission statement that they have. The Northern Chumash Tribal Council mission is to offer a foundation for Chumash people to bring our culture and heritage back to life, to create dignity with the people, and to educate the public that the Chumash have always been here. We have not gone anywhere, and we will always be here. One continuum. So I'd like to acknowledge and pay deep respect for the Chumash people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. So, as you probably know, I love Zen. Zen is full of irreverence, lots of irony, lots of contrast. And in doing some research for this, I was reading Zen Ritual, Stories of Zen Buddhist Theory in Practice. It was edited by Stephen Hine and Dale Wright. And it's a series of essays on ritual. But there is, as I said, plenty of irreverence in Zen, and there's a lot of pushback on ritual by Zen people. Huang Pose has a book, Dharma Record of Mind Transmission, and he dismisses all remnants of Buddhism that, quote, focus on outer form. When you are attached to outer form, to meritorious practices and performances, this is a diluted understanding that is out of accord with the way, capital W. Lin Chi, another Zen master, said, running around seeking outside. From the beginning, there is nothing to do. Simply don't strive. Just be ordinary. What are you seeking? Everywhere you're saying, quote, there's something to practice, something to prove, end quote. He goes on, as I see it, all this is just making karma. And there's the famous story of Bodhidharma when he comes into China and meets with the emperor, who has done these fabulous works for Buddhism, and is asking Bodhidharma, so what merit have I earned? And Bodhidharma famously says, no merit. And there is, what's interesting, there's even anti-ritual ritual. Anti-ritual ritual. So stories of this Zen masters up before the Sangha, and up strolls a student, and he takes the staff and breaks the staff. And other stories and some other koans where the student comes up and slaps the teacher. Irreverence. Despite all of this, ritual is found in Zen throughout its history. It's the guiding norm of everyday monastic life. And interestingly, ironically, keeping with Zen, some of those Zen masters that ridicule ritual are were running monasteries that were full of ritual. So all Zen rites and rituals are constantly pointing to the same place, to the realization of no separation between the self and the 10,000 things. Zen liturgy is a upaya, a skillful means. John Dido-Laurie talks about making visible that which is invisible. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means to bring that something into the awareness of the 6 consciousnesses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Making visible means that we are able to perceive through these organs of perception that something is there, though invisible. And what's especially rewarding for me is we often do this in Sangha, as one body. So what is ritual? There's just so many definitions. I'll share a few. And to me, ritual is kind of the umbrella, and liturgy and ceremony are underneath that umbrella, because we are full of ritual in Zen. Actually, we're full of ritual in our human lives. We have ritual going on, even if it's you make your coffee in the morning, right? Becomes kind of a ritual for many of us. You go to a football game, there's ritual on how you attend the game. But for our purposes, here's a few. Merriam-Webster says a Eucharistic rite, a rite or body of rites prescribed for public worship, a customary repertoire of ideas, phrases, or observances. Wikipedia, always the source of all knowledge, says it's the customary public ritual of worship performed by a religious group. And a ritual is a sequence of activities involving gestures, words, actions, or revered objects. And ceremony, a formal religious or public occasion, typically one celebrating a particular event or anniversary. And certainly our ritual falls under these categories. I was listening to a number of talks by Norman Fisher on this topic. And in one of his talks, he spoke of Charlie Corin Pokorny. Is anybody familiar with him? Deborah, he's out of the San Francisco, I think. He took Tokido from Reb Anderson. He's a Zen priest, teaches at the Brooklyn Zen Center and the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And he has this really wonderful paper that he's produced. And I want to quote from there. He says, how, rather than merely what is said and done, how, rather than merely what is said and done, is a vital dimension of how a tradition manifests itself and touches itself and others. Performance, and this is kind of the performance theory of ritual. Performance emphasizes the process of engaging in ritual activity rather than what such action may symbolize or represent. He looked to Fritz Stahl, the anthropologist. And Fritz said, to performing ritualists, and those are people that are involved with ceremony, doing rituals, to performing ritualists, rituals are like dance, of which Isadora Duncan, the famous American-born dancer and choreographer, said, if I could tell you what it meant, there would be no point in dancing it. Charlie goes on to say, the quality of performance manifests dimension of cultivation and training, which include confidence, style, grace, flair, presence, lack of hesitation, conviction, dignified bearing, and authenticity. These are not easily reducible to doctrine or experience, but arrive from practice of the ritual and the integrity of the whole person. I think that's a wonderful way of looking at it, especially those of you that are involved in ritual and have been doing so for many years. It does feel like a dance. It's choreographed. It's a big deal coming off your cushion and taking that meditative state, that mindfulness state, into action in service. And service has a lot of repetition. We do these services over and over and over until you feel like you embody them. And one teacher said that this liturgy, anything repetitious done with some type of intention, so I have a confession to make that I shared with some of you. After a service here this morning, I went home, brought my computer up, and seriously, I'm going to do a series of classes on this, so this has been weeks and weeks of preparation. Half the file was gone. Am I getting old? Yeah, it's somewhere up there, I'm sure. So I wanted to share a reading from a book that has been very important to me from my early time with Zen, and it's from John Daido Loori. And John Daido Loori had transmission from Maizumi Rōshi out of the Zen Center of Los Angeles, Bringing the Sacred to Life. And I'll share a few paragraphs from that. And this chapter starts, making visible the invisible. Just as in the arts of painting, poetry, music, and dance, In Zen liturgy, we manifest that which is known to us intuitively in the form of a visible, tangible reality. In this way, liturgy tends to make palpable the common experience of a group. There is, however, very little explanation of liturgy generally available. It is rare to see a substantive work on the subject in Buddhism or any other major religion. At best, we're given an explanation of the form, usually with little or no insight as to how the liturgy really functions or what it means. Now, if you've ever been to a Zen center, or even with our group, you get thrown into service positions without a lot of training. Indeed, liturgy is a very difficult subject to talk about because it is so fundamentally experiential. Talking about it tends to move us further and further from the heart of the matter. Another great book by John Daido-Loori was Gates of Zen, which likewise I found early in my Zen practice, and it really helped me to create a home practice, because I didn't have a Sangha that was meeting regularly until I went down to the Zen Center of Los Angeles. And creating a sacred space at home. And liturgy was one of those. So I've been doing some form of liturgy ever since. And now I like doing it with Sangha. It's much more powerful. I think you'll agree. Sitting with Sangha, doing service with Sangha. You know, whatever we do together in Sangha is magnified in power and benefit. And that's one of my three Qigong teachers, Devin Wallace, who's a member here, always says at the close of his Qigong sessions. There's kind of two approaches I found in my time in doing the Zen path. Two approaches to Zen liturgy. Some people absolutely love it. I happen to be one of those people, but I came by it honestly. I was an acolyte for 11 years at an Episcopal church, and on my way to become an Episcopal priest, and was heading to seminary. But it's a turnoff for a lot of people. You know, they're just, many of us came to Zen through academia, reading D.T. Suzuki and others. And they don't talk a lot about it, right? And then you end up at a Zen center or a monastery, and they're doing liturgy services 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening. And it's just not services. There's all sorts of ritual. You know, the number one ritual is Zazen, or it's our meditation. But there are so many more. We have meal gathas, and some of you that were here with the Buddha's birthday, we did the Zen meal gatha. There's gatha on opening the sutra, which we do whenever we start a talk. Gatha of atonement. We start off every morning when we do our sitting with the gatha. It's kind of a cleansing. Evening gatha at night when we kind of close up shop. And these gathas, this is Sanskrit term for song or verse. And we chant many dharanis. So in the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, the dharani is a sacred phrase or mantra that's said to have spiritual efficacy and often used as a talisman or for concentration. And they are believed to provide perfection, protection, and spiritual benefits. So our services are peppered with those. One in particular, it's called the Shosai Mi Kachijo Dharani, which means, translated, marvelously beneficial, disaster-preventing Dharani. Nomo sanmanda motonano harachi kotosha sono nanto chi to en gya 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 ki unnun shifura shifura hara shifura chichusa chichuri soaja senshi gya shirie somoko. So when I was sitting in meditation tonight, I was chanting that after losing all my notes. Many of you here, when you were here with the Buddhist service, you were involved in Zen liturgy. You saw one of our ceremonies. So as you do this, it's a progression as you do this over the years. And the idea is that you're putting aside all your hang-ups, your conditioning, your regular self with your troubles and problems, and you're jumping into another world. You're expressing your Buddha nature. Devotion is identity. You bow to the Buddha because you are the Buddha. And I know over time, not initially, when you're just so worried about, am I hitting the bell at the right time? Am I keeping the chant going? But it's an opportunity to dissolve the ego. You work with your resistance. You can examine it. And now, I don't know if you can get the liturgical calendar up there. This was so interesting in that I've been going to ZCLA or involved with ZCLA for 25 years. And we started this little sitting group up here in San Luis Obispo a little over 20 years ago. And of course, it was just sitting, and that's all we did. And then as I got ordained, taking Tokido as a priest, I started bringing in liturgy gradually. And now, nope, it's actually the other one. This will be the last one. It should say liturgical calendar. I'll continue though anyway. So we have annual services. The Buddhist service is certainly one of those. And we have services commemorating the Buddha's awakening. It's at Ruatsu Sesshin in December in our tradition. And we have a parinirvana service where we recognize the Buddha's passing. No dice? That's okay. New Year's Eve services. And I noticed that you folks, well, a number of years ago, you started doing the 108 bells as well, that we've done for so many years. Revolving the sutra ceremony is absolutely beautiful, where we have these sutra books and they get fanned. And this was an old tradition from the Japanese monasteries. All these sutras were stored in these damp cellars, and they were taking them out to air them out. And this became a tradition and a ceremony. Oh, you did get it. And you can kind of scroll down a little bit. We have monthly services as well. You'll see on one of those, I think it says, future service, founder service. We don't do that yet. But we do atonement ceremonies. This is one of the oldest ceremonies in Buddhism. one of the first, going back to the Buddha, was the refuge, taking refuge in the three treasures. And that was followed shortly after that with this atonement ceremony, fukatsu. And this was done initially on the new moon and the full moon ceremony. And basically they were reciting the precepts, the ethical guidelines, and it was almost like a confession. People would get up saying, I'm missing this, I've gone astray from this particular precept, and I'm bringing myself back up to alignment with that precept. The Gate of Sweet Nectar, I started with the intro to the gate. And it's a really complicated service. Down at ZCLA, we have 11 positions that are involved. So there's somebody hitting the woodfish, the mokugyo, there's the conch blower, a doan hitting all the bells, the officiant, and it goes, and on and on. And I was really hesitant for years to have us start doing that. And then I came to the realization, I do a lot of street retreats where we go just living on the streets. And at Auschwitz-Birkenau, we have bearing witness retreats. I think it's been almost 30 years now that Rōshi Bernie Glassman had started. And we do the gate there. So we can do the gate. We've done it in San Francisco on the streets in front of a gas station, another time in front of a Bank of America building, and we just sit in a circle and we do the gate. And I said, we can do the gate at the San Luis Obispo Zen Circle. So I'm finishing up some talks now as we're kind of slowly rolling in to being able to do the gate. We'll do it once a month. That's the goal. At ZCLA, we do it every Sunday. And it's my favorite. This is basically, you could tell from the intro, we're inviting everybody in, all the hungry ghosts. And Bernie Glassman Rōshi really broadened this. This actually goes all the way back to Buddhist time. And it's broadened over time or expanded over time. And he really expanded it to include all the people that are marginalized in society. And I think of the prisoners, inmates, homeless people, all those that are disenfranchised. But it's not just them, it's us. Our inner cravings, things that we may not be taking care of. So we invite everybody in. That's what the conch is actually for. It's trying to invite all these people in. And we do that, and then we invoke all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to come and join us. And what do you do when you bring a bunch of people together? You feed them. So we feed them. And there's some really magical dharanis. So it's like the 3 loaves with Christ, that we take what's really a small amount, and through these magical mantras, we expand the food to cover everyone. And so after we feed them, we give them some teachings, then we give them the precepts, and then there's a dance of joy, because this is celebratory. This is a wonderful thing that we're doing. And that's expanded. We used to, Zen people are so serious when we do our ceremonies, our forms. Well, we've really lightened it up. Rōshi Bernie, we do clown training now. And I forgot to bring my red nose, which I could put on. It's a dance of joy. And we literally dance for joy. I'm going to take just a few moments to talk about some of the daily services, even though we're getting short on time. But before I do, there are other, training ceremonies. When we enter a practice period or ongo period, which is kind of a more intense training period, we have an entering ceremonies for those times. There's a head trainee and shuso entering. When the head trainee takes on the job of being the head trainee, or shusho, that we call it, they enter, and then that culminates in their hosen, Dharma combat. And some of you were here for Fukuan's, Deborah West's hosen, which is quite another great celebration. There's preceptor transmission, which is called Denkai, Dharma transmission called Denbo, and Inka Some, which is when you become a Rōshi. So on our daily morning services, there are actually 3 services in one. And the first is dedicated to Shakyamuni Buddha. And in that, we alternate between the Heart Sutra in English and Sino-Japanese, the Makahanya Haramita Shingyo. The second is dedicated to the lineage of teachers and women ancestors. So we have 2 lists, over 80, something like 83 on each of the lists. The lineage is supposed to be the male lineage, although we have it on pretty good authority that one of those is actually a woman. But this was male-dominated, as most of you know, for centuries. So we have developed a list of women ancestors. And so we alternate chanting those. And within that second dedication, the sutra is the Song of the Jewel Mirror Awareness, which is attributed to Dongshang Liangje, 9th century. They're poems. That and the Identity of Relative and Absolute, the Sandokai, written by Shitao Chachian in the 8th century. The third, sometimes this monasteries or training temples have 4. We roll into this third service, a healing service for those who are gravely ill or are in need of support. And we also dedicate the merits to our abbots. The abbots emeritae, we have 2 of them now that are still living, and then our current abbot, Sensei Dharma Joy. And here we alternate between the one I just chanted really quickly, the Shosai Myo Kichijo Dharani, and the Enmei Juku Kanen Gyo. And Nancy, I think you're probably familiar with all of these from San Francisco. Yeah. Then the midday service, there's the lifespan of the Thus Come One. That's from the Lotus Sutra. And then we alternate that with the all-sightedness of the perceiver of the world's sounds, Kanzeon, which is Lotus Sutra, verse 25. And then the evening service is always the Daishin Dharani. Now, you have the bowing picture. Where you kind of get the gist of it, and you saw me doing full bows. Now, we can't hold a candle to the Tibetans. They really go in big time for bowing. And I am told that before they start the tantric practice, that it includes bowing 100,000 prostrations. Can you imagine that? 100,000 prostrations. If you did 100 full bows a day, we did some math on this, it would take 1,000 days or 3 years. And there are people who do finish their preliminary practice of bowing in a year. That's like 300 bows a day. Can you imagine that? So we're not that extreme, but we do a lot. When you do the Dharma, your Dharma transmission week and your Denkai week, you're doing bows to the lineage that I just mentioned, over 80 bows. You do that 3 times a day. Then we go to all the altars on the grounds, and you're doing bows to each one of the altars. I can't remember how many, but it's not 100,000. So when we start bowing as a practice, the similarities between that and Zazen become clear. It is impossible to describe it without actually doing it. Doing that kind of bowing, you really have to put yourself into it. And when you do so many bows, you really do completely forget yourself. Master Dogen Zenji, who was one of the founders of the Soto school, once said, as long as there is true bowing, the Buddha way will not deteriorate. So in this bowing, we completely pay respect to the all-pervading virtue of wisdom, which itself is the Buddha. But one of my favorite stories is Master Obaku. So he was the teacher of Master Rinzai. I'm sure many of you have heard of Master Rinzai. But he was famous for his frequent admonition to his students. Don't expect anything from the three treasures. Time after time, he was heard to say this. One day, however, Master Obaku was observed in the act of bowing and was challenged by one of his students. The student said, you always tell your students not to expect anything from the three treasures, and yet you have been making deep bows. In fact, Master Obaku had been doing so many deep bows over his lifetime, he had this huge, like calcium deposit, this bump on his head. Some of you here probably remember surfer's knots. That was a big deal. That was very cool when you had surfer's knots. The boards were big and we would paddle on your knees and you'd get these big calcium deposits. So there's Master Obaku. So when he was asked to explain this, he simply replied, I don't expect, I just bow. So let's do one chant together, and this would be the 4 Bodhisattva vows, just so you can feel the vibe. And of course, this is the Mahayana tradition, but you Theravada people, Vipassana people, get over it. Just Rōshi Bernie, great story. He was bringing in Father Robert Kennedy as a Zen master, giving him transmission. And his Zen students were really upset. Well, this guy's a Catholic priest. What are you doing bringing him into the fold? Bernie said, are we inclusive or not? With that, let's chant the Bodhisattva. It's going to be the very bottom one, if you can lift that up a bit. No? We may have to do it without you.
This one?
There we go. There we go. So you've got 2 sides that you can read. Good. And we'll be led by our Doan, Koshin, Gary Koshin West. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it 2 more times. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. And thank you all very much. Hopefully your eyes didn't glaze over too much. And I know it's late, you probably don't have time for questions, and sometimes I do that by design, so I don't have to answer anything.
When you go into the prison system, how much of the formality or do you work with the inmates?
You know, it's changed over time, as Nancy will certainly tell you, that we have different volunteers that have come in over time. Some from the Theravada tradition. I don't know if we've had a Tibetan there, but Vipassana, and there's been a lot of Zen folks. And I actually do have a lady going in with me right now, Sarah, who's from the Tibetan tradition. So in what I call the golden era, when we actually had 30, 40, sometimes 50 men in the interfaith chapel, we had full service. And it was an interesting blend because they had started some Theravada practices, and so with the Pali and Sanskrit. So we had that, and then very similar, the 3 services in one with a dedication following each service. And things have changed. I was telling Nancy that we were at 170% capacity. There were guys, you know, they're in single cells, but they were doubled up, and the mandate came from Sacramento that you need to get it down lower. So they started transferring inmates all over, and they did. And they kind of decimated almost all the faith tradition programs. So now if we have 6 to 8 guys, it's a big night. So I use a lot of mindfulness practices as well. A lot of the men don't have great attention spans, so you know the old Zen thing is just shut up, sit down, and meditate, period. Well, the guided meditations are very, very helpful. And then we're able to impart, you know, some Buddhist history and teachings. I'm going to, in fact, in the next few weeks, show the old documentary, The Buddha. Richard Gere is in that, and I think the Dalai Lama is interviewed as well. Do you have a question? Okay, good.
This is Ray in the Sangha, and thank you so much. Marvelous information. And I had a question. Do you feel that it is the chanting and the bowing and lighting incense and the practice that creates the sacred? Or do you feel that sacred exists and the liturgy honors that? Do we create sacred?
No, I think we reveal it. That's my feeling. That's just as Bernie would say, that's just my opinion, man. But I think that's the case. It's just like our Buddha nature. You know, most of us are thinking, you know, it's out there someday, or it's over there. And of course, what we're doing is just revealing what's already here. Right? And I feel the same way about the sacredness. And I wrote a poem a long time ago, and it was the longer I do this practice, the more I am in awe and amazement of the 10,000 things. Perhaps even the mundane. Perhaps especially the mundane. Yeah, so we're revealing the sacredness of life. I think that's what all these things do. Neo-Gathas, they really make you pause and realize this whole life is just so sacred. Everything we do is sacred. I don't know if anybody had. No, no questions online. Not even from Clay. Thank you all very much.